How's it going, everyone? We are gonna be doing a little Riverside TED Talk with this little with this little project that we got going on. For starters, I would like to at least dive into a certain aspect when it revolves around minority group that is underrepresented, and I feel that we need to at least shed some light upon it because without really knowing, how will we know? And the fact that I wanted to pick something for this project for Asian American Studies is that I wanted to pick something that was not really talked about, something that is going to be insightful to let others know upon different groups that are out there within the Asian American culture. But yeah, for starter notes, I would like to at least mention a few words from what I wrote, and then we can start diving into like personal talks and upon articles that we found, what led to picking this topic, and yeah, we'll go from there. Enjoy. For starter notes, what we see is a formation of what we define as reality. It has many different names to what the person defined it as being, but not every reality is present. Sometimes they are hidden in plain sight. So how do we see something that isn't there? To develop an understanding, we can't be confined within a single space. We must be willing to branch out of our own world of belief by stepping into a different hue of normality, so that a picture may commence and take shape from what we already know by providing new meaning to the learner. And we are going to be talking about the concept of Asian American women being labeled as ghosts. And why isn't there much information upon this subject? I'll be naming off the articles. You can also find them within the description as well too. We will be discussing upon bicultural Asian American women's experience of gender roles across cultural contexts, a narrative inquiry by Minsun Lee. Second article is Chinese Americans and the Borderland Experience on the Golden Mountain, the development of a Chinese American identity in the Women Warrior, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Ghosts by Diane, Todd, Bucci. Third article is Ghosts, Marriage, and Madness by Li Loh. Fourth article is A New History of Asian America, Making a Living, the Politics and Economics of Work Before the 1930s by Shelly Lee. What drove towards wanting to pursue this topic and why I feel like it's important to shed light on it was from Shelly Lee within the last article that I just mentioned, A New History of Asian America. Within chapter 3, there's like a subsection within it titled Women's Work, though it doesn't necessarily mention the word ghosts as far as like identifying that as towards women. We kind of find that more into the articles as we start diving deeper into the context of trying to understand more information about Asian American women during preset migration times, during immigration, and to later now in as far as like what is that representation still meaning to this day. Even if you're like second generation, first generation, third or fourth, there's still some hidden context behind this as far as like certain beliefs as far as within cultural standings. And I believe with this topic, it'll feel a little bit more clear as we go along. But within Women's Works, what first sparked it was the very first few sentences on page 77, stating, "Our understanding of women's labor in this early phase of Asian American history has been obscured due to several factors. One is numbers. As discussed earlier, the vast majority of Asian immigrants to the United States prior to the mid-20th century were men. Another issue was the fact that women did not always have a prime occupation nor work outside the home, making them invisible to many observers as laborers." Now, already from within this context, yes, women weren't really highly within the immigration chain into America, like from like the early 1900s, going into like early 1800s too. It was predominantly men, Chinese laborers that were heading into America for starters. Then with like other East Asian cultures like Koreans, the Filipinos, as well as also Japanese. Other migration patterns start progressing into America as well too. During this time period when America was heavily reliant on others for work, as far as towards like working within like agriculture or within industrial work as well too. But jumping more into this section for women's work, there was about a good forgive me on that. Though, okay, even though with within women working within men at the time, I'm jumping into like a next section within women's work in this section. It's heading into like the 1915s. This one little section is found within page 78 of the same article, stating, working next to and in the same occupation as men did not mean they were treated equally. However, in Hawaii in 1915, for instance, Japanese women field hands were paid an average of 55 cents per day compared to the 78 cents men received. Even though that's a small context towards analyzing within there with just a few sentences, just those few words saying that they were not represented or seen as equal upon men, it already gives some pointers that they were not represented as equals. But even within America as well too, majority of women still were not seen as equals by the leading dominance of like Americans residing within that area. Other aspects that made me want to dive deeper on this topic was that it was a very short piece of information within there, because it only goes up to like at least maybe 4 pages, almost 4 pages, because it ends like at page 81, where it just talks about women's work. After that, it jumps off into like a different subcategory, and that is kind of like what started and made me want to wonder, what does it mean towards Asian American women or Asian women in general being defined as ghosts? Like, how can we understand that and be able to analyze what that means and put it into different contexts and how it relates towards the different articles that we got? Before we can start defining the meaning ghost, I feel like it's important to discuss this next article towards gender roles and the term bicultural. And in this article, it's titled Bicultural Asian American Women's Experience of Gender Roles Across Cultural Contexts, a Narrative Inquiry by Minsun Lee. For starters, on page 62, it gives a really good description towards gender roles. It starts off by saying, gender roles are enactments of gender in relation to traditional notions of masculinity and femininity, found by Miville and Bertini Corpus and Diaz, 2013. This was found in page 62. Now, within gender roles, that can jump back to like way into like the earlier contexts of like, you know, human civilization. I think within any certain of time period, any different culture as well too, there's a certain belief that they have towards certain gender role systems and what is supposed to be expected from these certain gender roles towards their beliefs. Different beliefs can also occur too as well too as time progresses. We've seen that within historical passings, within any certain context, things evolve and change constantly. You can even see different functions within animals as well too. There's always a certain role that um, different sexes play. Same concept within that, yeah. But there's also another relation towards why that's important, with also being infused with biculturalism. Um, Biculturalism is bilinear, which means it's like evolving, it's independent. They're never going to cross towards their own path. They're always going straight, never crossing. It's also acculturation and enculturation, and it's also multidimensional, which is why it will not cross paths with one another. It's also orthogonal in domains of behavior and values. More context of that can be found within page 62, still within that same context. Some examples to define what biculturalism is language, the political system of a certain nation or country, forms of currency. There's also mannerism, religion, laws, food, architecture, but the list can go on. Different cultures have different mannerisms, they have different beliefs, they have different forms of currency. Not everywhere you go, like for instance, like within America, it's not going to always be United States dollars. Like if I were to go to Japan, they have yen. And same context, like when it comes to like religion as well too, laws, food's going to always be totally different within different contexts as you travel and experience the world. But how this relates towards Asian American women towards this context is that for someone that is from a different culture other than their own, they may alter their behaviors or thoughts according to the cultural context that they're in. So for someone that is from, let's say, China, and they're not familiar with the culture or the environment that's around them, if they were to be migrating to America or Latin America or Europe, any other place that's other than China that doesn't have a form of resemblance or an act towards language as well too, they're gonna focus on trying to adapt in order to survive within those environments that they're in. Which is why I feel that biculturalism is a real key importance to understanding towards this discussion we're talking about right now, towards the identification of what it means to be ghost within Asian American history. In relations towards this topic, on I think they both biculturalism and gender roles, they kind of go hand in hand within this same context. Sorry if I'm like rambling on within this section, but I just really want to pinpoint as far as towards what's the importance within that aspect. Another notion that was another notion that kind of relates towards this topic, especially too with biculturalism and gender roles, is found on page 63. It's going to be jumping in towards within a little bit of like belief systems within this section. It states, within East Asia, countries such as China, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea, along with Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, have been heavily influenced by Confucianism, which centers hierarchical relationships, such as between father and son, husband and wife, and adult and child. And that is found on page 63 within this article for Bucci. In relations towards that, on how it can relate towards the definition of ghosts within Asian American history, is that within within that context, traditional gender roles for Asian immigrants, it can be quite, I wish there was a better way to say this, kind of like shifted towards a hierarchical stature, like what we just mentioned, where majority women were seen as less superior compared to men. Women would have to be subservient to their fathers, husbands, and sons due to Confucianism beliefs. That is a kind of clear context towards why maybe there is this sense that there is this labeling towards ghosts being defined towards Asian American women and Asian women in general, because there's like a lot of social pressures that both that they face on both sides by maintaining traditional values and control while in the face of American racism, and just upon that, you just got to understand that, well, women in a sense were kind of put within the middle within this area that they're facing these certain social pressures that are going along within their lives as they're migrating to like a new place of habitation. You got cultural beliefs that are being heavily influenced upon them within their daily lives, while also being in a new location that they're in like a very I would say kind of like hostile environment. Just the fact that it was like highly racialized at the time being, for Asian immigrants heading into shore, not just towards women but also men as well too. And this just revolves around all like within Asia. I'm talking about like people coming from China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, India, the Philippines as well too. The American racism was being really at its high peak within that time period, like when a lot of migration starts occurring. And it kind of makes sense too towards the relations of that being put against towards women, and also within the Confucianism beliefs on like hierarchical statures that they are faced and being put in the middle against all odds. But that should be all from within that article, because that is just to give you a clear understanding towards facts, like just facts, pure facts that are just jumping in. The other articles are going to reflect more upon reviews upon like memoirs that were carried on upon predominantly on the articles were coming from Chinese women's experience within America, especially too when they're coming into a new country with their families. The next article we're going to be talking about is Chinese Americans and the borderline experience on Golden Mountain, the development of a Chinese American identity in the Women Warrior, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Ghosts by Diane, Todd, Bucci. Now, the article is a reflection of the Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston, illustrating the story of her immigrant family and their efforts to rise above their working status in America. The narrator may not provide naming within the memoir, but it is intentionally done to say that she doesn't know who she is yet, making the Woman Warrior a mediation for like Chinese Americans who carry a bicultural identity. Now, for starting notions, first thing that I wanted to highlight from the passage was this quote here, found on page 126. It states, "The identity crisis that the narrator experienced is worsened by the fact that she is female in a culture that does not value women." Keep in mind, she is a little girl at the time that the story is being taken place, and There are expectations that she feels that she is trying to live up to for her family's sake. But there's also uh, another reality that she's facing as well too, being within America, and how she's trying to fit into that society as well too, knowing that like how we just talked about earlier as well too, when you're coming into like a new environment, you want to adapt, you want to be able to try to evolve around quickly as you can within the situation that you're in, so that way you feel like you can be able to survive and adapt further. um but adding on within this, the storyline is based around the Hong family. They mostly talk about in the beginning that their laundry business is achieving amounts of success. They are being able to reap the rewards of America by being able to fly kites, attend movies, go to theme parks, things like that. Though in this aspect, the family is moving up within like the social world, but within this context, America still sees them as being foreigners, and they're still being placed within that bubble. Um, though I know right now we're not talking about like Asian American women on this little section right there, but that is something to be kept in mind as far as like the whole of like Asian immigrants being seen as like the second minorities within early migrations into America at the time being. There's this one really like heartfelt piece that I want to say from the article. Um, it's about her attending school and how she's trying to like fit into society. It can be found on page 127. It starts off saying, "The narrator hopes to blend in at school by making herself American feminine. She recalls trying to walk erect, knees straight, toes pointed forward, not pigeon-toed, which is Chinese feminine. Similarly, her friends are unhappy with their Asian features and try to anglicize themselves by taping their eyelids. But their appearance acts as a barrier to American acceptance because it identifies them as foreigners in the eyes of the Anglos." That passage right there kind of struck home because I mean, being as like a little girl, like at the time, and like you just want to fit in, but you feel like that you're being judged all around, odds like against you. Um, in its way, no, like actually, like in full way, it's really mentally health damaging. Just the fact the things that they had to endure, especially too, it shows how divided America was at the time being too. This social pressure of not being accepted, it gives rise towards that same meaning that we were trying to define earlier towards what it means to be ghost within America for Asian women. I feel like that kind of like really hits the nail on the board within this context. Just the fact that like that was really heart driven, that she felt that certain way when she was going to school. Especially too, like at a kid at her age, like just be going on like I think this was like what, like in high school within this context. There's other aspects too that are like psychologically damning, like not speaking English. It kind of makes you be ignored by the mass public when you can't speak English. The fact that silence is tantamonious to invisibility both disturbs and undermines the confidence of the immigrant. That can be found on page 128 that I just said right there, but it is true. The fact that if you can't be able to speak the language that you're in, you kind of feel self secluded from everybody else because you don't understand exactly what is being said. It's a very lonely setting that they get put into within these certain situations. It doesn't help too the fact that jumping back towards gender roles and like how there's like a certain hierarchical stature between men and women, and towards women they have to be very subservient, like we just mentioned. It's very heartbreaking knowing the fact that they're caught in the middle within all this certain aspects that's all around them. Um, Jumping further into this, let's go. But she does leave a good pointer on page 132, stating, "The narrator illustrates that for some Chinese American women, achieving the American dream is not simply about financial success. It is also a means of resisting the rigid gender roles imposed on them by their Chinese culture." So she's saying that you don't have to achieve financial success, but like as long as you're able to overcome the boundaries that you feel like you're confined in within Chinese culture, you can be able to start identifying your own forms of success through independence. And that is a key winner right there within that context. So that is all from that article. But jumping in next is Ghost, Marriage, and Madness by Li Loh. It still revolves around the women warrior. Within this context, we have a character named Moonchild and No Name Woman. Moonchild, my bad, not Moonchild, Moon Orchid. Moon Orchid is it's a physical character that is enduring what other people around her define as madness, because she does not reside towards certain beliefs that others around her have. Versus No Name Woman, she is neither alive nor dead. In a sense, it could be kind of put like in as like the narrator talking, but she's making herself her own character within this context. But to give a little bit more insight on this, it's found on page 213. It states, "The concept behind Mood Orchid and No Name Woman is resisting the heteronormative concepts of marriage, logics that manage immigrants historically, situated, and ideologically constructed responses to exclusion era laws." Because within this article, it does just talk about their overcoming as far as towards going along with the pack and refining themselves within marriage, but they kind of obscure away from that context and they don't want to get married, and people kind of find that odd within this passage as it talks about them. I mean, certain aspects like of them rejecting marriage, there's this one section on page 217. It states, "The Chinese woman who does not yearn or wait for her husband does not exist and is considered a ghost within the immigrant community's symbolic universe." It's basically saying that she was kind of like disowned from like her own community. And like I said, that's found on page 217. The fact that if you are disowned from your own community and you're within a world that is totally different from your own, it's already putting you within a tight position of trying to cope with the world around you. There's this other section that happens to Moon Orchid, because she is our physical character within this piece. It states on 160, my apologies, not 160, page 220. Within this context, she gets sent to an asylum for her madness because she is not able to reside towards the general normative of like reasoning. So she kind of just gets sent to an asylum for being mad, suppose. It states this, because she cannot fit in and cannot be understood, she must be separated from reasonable company. On the other hand, Moon Orchid is happy in the asylum because all the inmates speak the same language, the very same. They understand me, and I understand them. Although they are unrelated, the inmates with whom Moon Orchid shares the same language are referred to as her daughters, and Moon Orchid is especially proud of the pregnant ones. What rang bells for me on this one was the fact that even though she gets put within this asylum, I feel like this can be kind of metaphorical, meaning that she like let's say there wasn't any asylum at all, but more so like this was kind of like an asylum within the mind itself, that the world around her is kind of like the people that are suppressing her and saying that she is not fit to fit within these social norms that they are in. So that's why there's certain asylums, like within certain junctions, that have people that speak the exact same language, because they can relate to you, they can understand you, they can be able to make you feel like the world is not as crazy as it is, and that you are sane. Like, I think that's why it's good to be jumped into like a certain social norm that you're used to, especially too when it comes to like people that can relate. I think that's why she's been saying this section right here. Maybe that's why she says that she feels happy being in the asylum. And I did mention towards pregnancy earlier. She was supposed to. She did give birth within this article, from what is being discussed within this section, because it's not the full story. This is kind of like just a review upon the main story itself, and then the author that wrote this article is kind of like depicting it piece by piece as it goes along, just to uncover like hidden gems that are inside of this as we're like going along. Like this section right here, it states on page 222, if female reproduction is meant to solidify a woman's position in a family, increasing her value within the economy of the patrilineal family unit when she produces sons, the woman's enjoyment of each other has no purpose other than enjoyment for the sake of enjoyment, expressed through the sensation of touch. Now, within that, I feel that she's kind of like trying to like throw away towards normatives that on what she believes as far as being within this aspect through pregnancies and things like that. I think she just mentioned it just for the fact that if this is all that I am going to be able to experience towards joy is by producing sons, then I don't want it. Like, I want to be able to experience joys other than through sensations of touch. Like, I shouldn't have to be confined within this little space which ultimately like puts her in like her own little box. I do know that we did talk about ghosts and things like that within past context of like just being Asian women in America. But I think within this section, it starts talking about like being a little bit rebellious and not going within the social norms of like what they're used to seeing. And I think that's another form of like what puts her as a ghost, not just through America, but like from her own community as well too. They kind of like disown her and make her a ghost, not physically though. Well, within all those contexts, we did finish up all that on what we were able to talk about. We were able to talk upon gender roles and biculturalism within A New History of Asian America. We also got to talk about bicultural Asian American women's experience of gender roles across cultural context. at least within that one, we was able to get a little bit more factual pieces of information that were benefit to us as far as like getting this stuff down. But we started getting a little bit more personal insights from Chinese Americans in the borderland experience on Golden Mountain. That one was a little bit more insightful to show as far as like how biculturalism and gender roles play hand. They kind of disrupt the social orders of people coming into America, especially certain groups, certain minorities like Asian American women within this context. I feel like that was a very key pointer that kind of hit home run for this one, and was able to help define what it means to be ghost within America for Asian women. And Ghost, Marriage, and Madness, that one was to be able to show how you can be disowned from your own community if you do not follow towards certain social norms that you have set and bound. And you can be a ghost from both sides of the party, even if you were stuck in the middle. You can be cast away from both ends. And I think that was a good pointer and view inside of how you can kind of go crazy in a sense, like that you are kind of like all alone, but like you just only have your thoughts to think about within this aspect with no one to share them with. And I think this is another good insider of what it means to be ghost for Asian women. But yes, thank you for tuning in. I hope you did enjoy this DIY TED Talk podcast that I am doing. And I'm going to leave it in at 40. Thank you.